But a fundamental one is that he dumbs down God and he soups up nothing. He continually talks as though God is some sort of upmarket figure within space and time. Now, from 450, 500 BC, where with the Greek philosophers, God is outside space and time. God is necessary, self-sufficient, uncaused, unconditioned. That's the hypothesis you've got to wrestle with. The second thing is that Krauss says nothing about the Big Bang coming out of nothing. Admittedly, he comes clean on about 6 pages from the end of his book, and I don't know whether Richard has read it that far because he gave it a foreword. What he says is what Richard is describing as nothing is a sort of a mixture of particles and perhaps a vacuum with electromagnetic forces working on it. That's what Krauss is talking about under the heading of nothing. And there's a very good review of this in the New York Times, not a pro-religious paper at all, where Krauss is absolutely denied and demolished, although especially by his supporters claiming that he says things come out of nothing. He doesn't say that.
It's a matter,
you can quickly respond to
you
that.
You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
You say faith is rational and evidence-based. I mean, if that were true, it wouldn't need to be faith, would it? I mean, if there were evidence for it, why would you need to call it faith? You'd say just evidence. And when you said that faith in relativity, in Einstein's theory of relativity, is evidence-based, that of course it is. But the evidence is all important. I mean, Einstein's predictions fit in with observed fact and with a whole body of theory, whereas we only need to use the word faith when there isn't any evidence.
No, not at all. I presume you've got faith in your wife. Is there any evidence for that? On
Yes,
which you
plenty.
base it? Yes.
Plenty of evidence.
Darwin made a great contribution. I remember talking with Julius Kornberg, a very distinguished biologist, and he's worked with ants for years. And he said, you know, he's managed to change them by changing the conditions. But there are a number of things that evolution doesn't explain. Darwin realized that. Darwin was a theist because he said he couldn't believe that the immense cosmos and all the beautiful things in the world came about either by chance or out of necessity. He said, I have to be ranked as a theist. Now,
that's just not true.
Excuse me,
just plain not true.
It's on page 92 of his autobiography. Go and have a look.
You know, there's a bumper sticker that was doing the rounds in the 80s and in many parts of the US, which said on the back, there will, as long as there are math tests, there will always be prayer in schools. It's true. You can't ban a student from praying when he's looking at a question paper in an exam and he knows he's going to flunk it. You better believe he's going to call out to God. In fact, I don't know how many of you know the name of Richard Dawkins. Do you know the name of Richard Dawkins, that very noted atheist, belligerent atheist? I want to tell you something fascinating that happened, and this is a true story. It happened a few months ago. He was on a radio program on the BBC live. And he was dialoguing with one of the ministers of St. Paul's Cathedral. And he was, as usual, Dawkins just very belligerent and hostile and verbose and all that he does to criticize believers. And he said, you know, Christians are basically very unintelligent people. He said, if you want to ask an average Christian even to name the Gospels, they won't know it. They don't know it.
Interesting.
It tells us an awful lot. When you say, I'm telling people what it is to be Christian, we ask them a very comprehensive list of questions. You can look at the press release. It would be very hard for anyone to deny that many of these questions, most of these questions, are fundamental to the Christian religion.
But you're saying they're not Christians, even if they think of themselves as Christian. You know what they are, even though they tell you.
I'm not presenting my opinion here. This press release is offered to people to look down it and say, look, these people who call themselves Christians actually don't read the Bible, don't go to church, don't believe Jesus was the Son of God, don't even know what the first book of the New Testament is.
But Richard,
it's up to you to make up your mind whether you think they're Christian. Don't ask me. My opinion is not relevant.
Richard, if I said to you...
And so the vicar just kept listening, and he said, Richard, you're a very erudite scientist. And Richard's just nodding, you know. He said, your favorite book is The Origin of Species, right, by Darwin? He said, right. He said, Richard, can you name the full title of the book? This happened live. And Dawkins said, oh, yeah, I know, it's a much longer title than The Origin of Species. So the vicar said, go ahead. Name it for me.
If I said to you, what is the full title of The Origin of Species? I'm sure you could tell me that.
Yes, I could.
Go on then.
On The Origin of Species,
I'm quoting this to you now, please forgive me. This is the way it went. Richard Dawkins says, The Origin of Species, oh my God.
On The Origin of Species, there is a subtitle with respect to the preservation of favoured races in the fight in the struggle for
You're
life.
the high pope of Darwinism.
Not bad,
and
give him some justice.
But if you asked people who believed in evolution what that question, and then you came back and said 2% got it right, it would terribly easy for me to go, they don't really believe it after all. It's just not fair to ask people these questions.
The ultimate proof of the sovereignty and omnipotence of God is that it even takes an atheist who doesn't believe in him to call upon him to remind him of the title of the book that helped him deny him. And the next morning's newspaper said, and I quote, "It's been a bad week for atheists." Richard Dawkins was asked the question very plainly what he thought about God. You've heard this. It is quoted in many books, and David Aikman in his book. Listen to this, it's a mouthful. What do I think about God? The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it. A petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak. A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser. A misogynistic, homophobic racist. Infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. I guess he doesn't like God. Listen to it. He's jealous, petty, unjust, unforgiving, vindictive, bloodthirsty, misogynistic, homophobic, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Now, he's just finished telling us he's a fictional character. That's half of the point. The other half of the point is when you ask him what he thinks of humanity. He goes on to say that he believes basically in the goodness of humanity without God watching over. Now, I don't know if I'm confused or he is. If God doesn't exist and all these descriptions apply, who did these things? A person is deluded when they believe something contrary to all the evidence. Who is deluded? Who wrote the Old Testament if God didn't inspire the words? Humanity. That would be his answer. Then who ordered all those things? Humanity. Why on earth are you so big on humanity and so small on God when humanity manufactured the God that you deny?